Hello. We're going to jump right into the next session, and this one is an exciting one as well, folks. We're going to talk all about 5G private networks and tailoring those 5G private networks to the customer's needs. And with me today, I have Marco. I don't want to ruin your last name, my tongue doesn't even roll that way. Please help me.
It's Bijvelds.
Bijvelds. There you go. I got it right this time. And we have Mikael with us, and also we have Thierry. So I would like to, if you can spend 1 minute to tell our audience a little bit about yourselves.
Of course.
Before we dive into the conversation.
Glad to do so. So, hi everyone. Nice to be here today. So my name is Marco Bijvelds. I'm SVP of EMEA and APAC for Core. And Core is enabling our customers in their IoT journey by providing IoT services. We deploy, manage, and scale IoT with our customers through connectivity solutions and analytics, and private networks are part of that, as is cellular connectivity. So, thank you.
And I'm Mikael Schachne, so I'm part of the BICS team in charge of the Telco market. So at BICS, we do provide global connectivity for people, but also for machines all around the world. So we connect thousands of mobile operators, also MVNOs, nowadays private networks, which is the topic of today, but also digital players and global enterprise to make sure that they can connect every people or every machine around the world.
Excellent. Thierry?
And I'm Thierry Leford. I'm a director with Strategy End. Strategy End is part of the PwC group. We are actually, as part of Strategy End, we are several thousands in the world as a global firm. And we address multiple industries, among which the TMT, telecommunication, media, and technology. And I basically advise on strategic topics clients in the telco, the vendors, the OEMs like Nokia, Ericsson, mobile, fiber, as well as satellite connectivity, and a bit of data center as well. So we help actually our customers address their needs, understand their needs actually, understand their strategic route to market, a range of topics really which is on their strategic agenda, and among which private network is one. For vendors like Nokia, Ericsson, but also for telcos to understand how to address these markets.
So we have a very, I would say, controversial subject matter with 5G and 5G private networks. And I call it controversial because there is this tug of war between whoever you're going to be talking about. Do we need 5G private networks? Or what we do right now with 4G or any other technologies is sufficient enough? And where does the line, what is the line which way we're going to go? But that's in my head the first thing that I think, or the first question that I get from customers who will ask me about 5G private networks. So I will just throw the first question out there and ask you, gentlemen, what is your opinion? Do we need 5G private networks? I'll start with you.
All right, let's have a go. In fact, when our customers look at, and from the industry, look at private network, there are several things that come to mind. One, some of them already have some wireless networks. Some of them don't have anything. They have to make a decision. And that decision, we advise them to make it as a strategic decision, looking at what they need now, but also what they will need in the future, and how their private network is actually helping them to build a foundation for the future of their services, for helping them extract operational efficiency, a better understanding of what's going on basically in their company, in their production sites, and so on. We see two dimensions here. One is the site complexity. Site complexity varies across industries. You don't have the same complexity in a car manufacturing plant as you have, for instance, in a harbor, or you have in an airport, or in a hospital, for instance. These are very different type of complexity. And Why? Because in some cases you might have difficulties to implement, for instance, wireless because of the complexity of the site, how it's spread out, whether you have one or multiple sites, whether you have inclusion of new devices on the go or not, how you want to control. And then you have, of course, the technical requirements, which are very specific to to the kind of IoT you want to have within your private network. And the more complex the site and the more complex of the requirements, then the more adapted 5G is. And you can go down to the less complex the site is, the less complex the requirements are, than Wi-Fi. And in between, what you have is LTE, 4G. And a lot of companies actually adopt LTE even today, not 5G.
Great.
So, yeah.
You go.
Yeah, I will concur with my colleagues here. So basically, we see 4G as already a great upgrade to many private networks who are mostly using Wi-Fi today. So with 4G, you get already, let's say, enhanced quality of service, enhanced security, enhanced also maybe, bandwidth as well. So it's already, the preferred option to start with cellular technology, or I'd say 3GPP-based technologies in the private domain. And it's also providing a smooth migration path to later upgrade to 5G when you want to add additional use cases, when you want to have, for instance, let's say ultra-low latency to control robots in real time, for instance, or when you want to further add additional endpoints into your environment, where you want to welcome not thousands of devices, but maybe at some point of time hundreds of thousands of millions of devices into one private domain. At this point of time, you might feel quite congested and quite limited using only 4G technology. So it all depends, let's say, how big your private network project is and how much, let's say, additional value you want to leverage out of this investment.
I would also think like also the use case, right? How critical it is, and if you need the low latency and speed that 5G brings will play a big role. What do you think?
Exactly. I think it's important, right? In the end, we're building networks to solve some kind of business problem.
Exactly.
And we have to keep that in mind. It was mentioned in the previous session as well. Technology is just a means to an end. And 5G is the same thing, right? We're trying to solve a business problem which has a business case, which has then underlying costs related to that. So applying, let's say, a state-of-the-art technology for a very simple use case doesn't make too much sense.
Exactly.
Because it's too expensive. At some point, 5G will be as expensive as 4G, as LTE, and there's no difference anymore. I think that's going to be the direction of travel. And to that point, future-proofing in that sense is a good way of thinking of it. But spending a lot of money on a complex 5G use case for something that's really simple doesn't make too much sense. So it's very use case specific. So I think there's no generic answer. It's very much business case driven. And I think in many cases, many use cases that we come across, the use case is so simple that you not necessarily would need 5G. The more exotic ones that we know of, like robotics and AGVs and remote surgery, those are the ones that we dream of. But realistically, are those the use cases that we come across on a daily basis? So I think there's a balance to be found, and the business case is the foundation of that.
See, that's what I was going to ask. How many of those use cases that we all dream of have you actually worked on outside, the standard ones that don't even need the 5G yet? Right. So what are your customers? Are your customers coming actively and saying, "I would like a 5G private network, please"?
Well, from our perspective, we always start at the problem, as I was saying. So 5G is top of mind because, 5G is the hype, is the latest thing. Yeah. And that's a good reason, because it has obvious inherent advantages. Let's not forget about that. So 5G is a beautiful technology that serves a lot of purposes. But we started the problem, and if 5G is needed, that's fine. If 5G is not needed, that's fine too. And let's not forget about the variety of use cases, as you mentioned. I mean, having a nationwide private network that you need for some kind of utility that is using a spectrum in a country and that wants to have, let's say, that private network being used, is a whole different thing than a retail shop needing connectivity in the specific spot for the time being. Could be a 5G solution as well,
Could be,
but a whole different one, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's very difficult to say whether one and the other is serving needs 5G. But we do see customers in need coming in with 5G requests, exactly for the reason that you mentioned. It's a bit of a hype, and some customers are more advanced and truly need the technology for those more advanced use cases.
Well, I would say that those are the use cases that would showcase the value of 5G. Let's think of 5G a little bit outside the private network confinement, even though we're talking about private networks today in conjunction with 5G. But it will be very interesting to highlight, and I will come to you, what is 5G giving us that 4G is not giving us, or LTE is not giving us, or LoRaWAN? Why are we so excited about 5G?
So, as I was mentioning, 5G is bringing additional benefits to Wi-Fi and for sure also LTE, where you can welcome really a lot of endpoints in one particular area. So with 4G, you might have congestion issue just to handle all the signaling that all those endpoints will start generating, just to make sure that they are still visible, still controllable on the network domain. So 5G is really scalable to welcome really, a huge number of devices. Then, of course, we talk about, all the nice use case around let's say, ultra low latency with automated vehicles, maybe at some point of time, and also robots that you have already in some factory. We see those automated robots working all together without any human intervention. And this is really what 5G can bring, really bringing down close to zero the latency. And then finally also the bandwidth. When we will start with a lot of also, video feeds, high quality video feed, well, 4G might be also limited in terms of spectrum availability, and then bandwidth you can allocate to each of those devices, to each of those, let's say, data streams. So you will need to upgrade to 5G to accommodate for this massive amount of data.
I think in one everyday use case that it would be great for all of us outside the whole industrial and everything is real-time translation. We're doing business globally. I think that's one use case that if I can talk to somebody and what you normally hear, somebody speaking Chinese and you speak in English and the real-time translation and you have a conversation, that will change the world and how we operate. And I think that's where 5G, and I'm not going to touch 6G yet because we still haven't scratched the surface with 5G in my opinion, but that's a real use case we can all benefit.
Also, you might not need a private network for that.
Exactly.
5G is just enough.
Yes,
right? So
exactly.
5G plus private network is a different story.
Yeah. What would you, what are you seeing from the customer perspectives? What are the common pitfalls that you should be avoiding when they're looking at 5G and private networks?
So when they look at private networks, we help our customers think long term in order to close the business case. Because if it's just to solve today's problems, usually you don't close the business case. You close it with a view into the future, establishing with your private network a foundation on which you can build it. And today, I don't know if you hear me. Today, where is the added value from private network? It's mostly in data analytics. It's to be able to understand what's going on in your site or collection of sites, and either run automation, like we mentioned, robotics, autonomous, carts, and so on. But do that with high precision. No one would want a automated cart to run close to an aircraft if there is not 100% certainty that this cart is not going to bump into the aircraft, right? Because that, then you have to take the aircraft out of service. Possibly if it's minor for an hour or two, if it's more serious, for weeks. So you can see in some areas it's highly sensitive what you do with automation. But on top of that, you can also have a better understanding of your operations, optimize basically your operations. You can have also a better understanding of what's going to fail in the future, so predictive. You can diagnose as well your current, let's say, failures, if you have some. And so you have a range of let's say, applications of data analytics which require acquiring the proper data in many cases with the constraint that we gave, which lends to 5G, and on top of that, security. Because what you can do also on top of 5G is also slicing. You can have quality of service, which is dedicated to some areas of operations. And so all of that means that you might build a business case which is solid by looking into what optimization and understand where the money is on the table and be able to make sure that you can cover it with your private network.
I think a big driver will be the slicing, because you can slice the network spectrum in different, almost virtual private networks, and virtualization is very big with 5G, and then you can take that into the private network themselves. It should in essence drive a lot of the use cases and a lot of the demand. What are we seeing? Because all right, somebody is building a private network, be it 5G, be it LTE, be it LoRaWAN, it's a private network, right? One of the challenges that I have been, and I don't know if you guys, what are your views on this, is like going from a private network to the public network and back on demand. How, I'm going to start with you, Michael, because you come from a more operator background, and I would like to understand, is that now happening efficiently, or do we still see challenges?
Yeah, you were mentioning the pitfall. So
Yeah.
I mean, when our customers are coming to us, it's really to solve what you exactly described, which is really the connection between the private domain and the public domain. So it's great to leverage, 3GPP technologies in the private space, but one of the great advantage of it is that it's standard and it can be also used anywhere in the world. So operators are nowadays also helping private networks, enterprise, to both link the private area with the public space, so that when you have a workforce leaving the private domain, they can still work, they can still access all the application. When you have also all the assets leaving, you can keep on tracking them from the private domain to the public domain, but it's quite a challenge. So nowadays you have about, I think, 1,000 companies who have deployed private networks, I think for about 3,000 sites. And in the world you have 1,000 mobile operators. So when you think about connecting each of those 3,000 sites to each of those 1,000 mobile operators, well, you have a big spaghetti out there that you need to solve. And that's a huge challenge, and we are facilitating that, acting as a kind of gateway or hub to connect each of the private network to the public domain, so that you can really leverage the full power of 4G or 5G technology.
Yeah. What do you think, Marco? What are you seeing?
So the convergence of public and private is a big topic indeed, right? So any mobility use case is actually requiring that convergence. But also, I mentioned the example of a, let's say, nationwide network, private network. Not having full coverage per se over there also means that you can transition between public and private networks depending on, let's say, the coverage. But it's certainly something that is needed. I think the beauty of using 5G or 3GPP standards in general is that it's indeed working with the publicly available network. So there's one big network that's available to you. So you have full coverage, ubiquitous coverage, and it also supports other things, right? So what we're doing, so one of the use cases we've been working on with one of our customers is to go from public to private with eSIM technology. Why not? That's working, right? So it's we've shown it's working. It's a good solution. adding, let's say, other technologies on top of that with IoT Safe, which allows zero-touch provisioning.
Yeah.
So it adds all the features that are being supported by the 3GPP standards, and I think that's where the benefit for the customer is using those type of solutions.
I agree with you, and it's quite exciting, the topic that you just started. And also what you were talking about earlier about the traveling workforce and going from public to private and what that entails. Do we build a bubble? And where does the bubble extends? If I'm working at my home, who has access to my home network? Is it my company or is it me? And then we can start talking about identity and data sovereignty, and we go beyond the 5G and private networks, but it's the implications of building a private network as an organization, be it 5G or not, that extends outside the borders of the organization when especially the workforce travels. So we have a few minutes before we close. What would be your number one? When you're thinking about 5G private networks, what would be your number one, I would say, suggestion or advice to people getting into it?
Well, deploying a private 5G network is simple but not straightforward. I think that's what it boils down to. I think people think of it as a Wi-Fi network. It is similar, but it's very different at the same time, right? So it's 3GPP based. It's different protocols. You need expertise to actually deploy it. I think you can probably manage and maintain it yourself, but let's say designing it, deploying it, work with an expert to get it done. That would be my advice.
Great, thank you so much.
Yes, indeed. I mean, have the right partnership in place, have also the right use case to really leverage the power of 4G or 5G in your private space, and also making sure that, I mean, you are not creating an isolated island. I mean, maybe you want that, but maybe you can also create even more value by bridging your new private network to the rest of the world, the rest of the mobile world as well, and then bring on the right solution for that.
Great. And Thierry?
So I would have recommendations for enterprises, but also for telcos.
I like that.
And also for OEM vendors.
Please say.
So for enterprises, it's about understanding that 5G is really a foundation, and it's about thinking about the future and what you can build on that. And so the use cases, it's not looking at today's situation, but it's looking at what is the potential of adopting 5G for my business, and how can I really leverage all the use cases, but also thinking of how I play with the data, what I can extract from the data, and whether I need a 100% private 5G network, or I need actually a semi-private network, which is an extension of the telco network, but then isolated, and so on. And whether I need also, what kind of infrastructure do I need? Multi-edge computing. So, what are all my requirements which drive, the build-up of that network? For telcos, I would say, look, the opportunity is quite sizable. If you just look at one company like Volkswagen, it just started actually to implement private networks on 122 manufacturing sites. So 122 sites. That's not a small private network. And you can imagine the ramification to layers for that private networks, functions, probably some of them very focused on manufacturing, others on non-manufacturing. So there's a huge opportunity, but then it takes actually quite some capabilities to address that opportunity. So for telcos, it's about build your capabilities in order to serve that market, because this is the only market, a 5G market, which is growing and growing fast. I mean, consumer is not a high growth market. And for vendors, it's more about partnership, because vendors basically can be good. Partners can be good. Vendors have they're selling their equipment, they're selling their services, and potentially they just don't serve the telco world, but also the enterprise world. However, you really need vertical industry knowledge in order to understand how to build those private networks. It's very different to build a private network for a harbor than it is for a hospital, for instance. Use cases are so different. The constraints are so different. Take a harbor, for instance. One of the constraints is you have what we call container, dead zones, canyons, where propagation is very hard in between containers, and yet you have equipment that goes through those containers. Each type of enterprise has a very different landscape. You need to understand those requirements very deeply and the type of solutions that are most appropriate. So yeah, partnership for the OEM vendors, which will help them actually penetrate that market as well, potentially together with the telcos, right?
Yeah, and it goes quite well hand in hand for the other partnerships, like the telcos and the OEM vendors and the enterprises. It's all about the ecosystem. I tell everyone that IoT is not a solo game, and we need to work together to make sure that it's actually successful and it works.
And of course, in telcos, I include all communication providers like
exactly.
Let's say the specialized
the MVNOs and the specialized players as well as telcos. I think we are on the top of the time. We run out of time and we have one more session. It's an exciting area of 5G private networks and 5G in general. There is a lot to be discussed, and I will advise my MEF colleagues for next time to do more than 30 minutes, because we haven't even touched on business models yet and how to make money even with 5G private networks. But there you go. Next one, I will start with how do I make money rather than in the nitty-gritty, because that's what the folks want to know, right? But I would like to thank you for taking the time and sharing your knowledge. Marco, Michael, Thierry, thank you so much. It's a little bit warmer on this spot than it is outside, so it's a small benefit. But I hope you enjoy the rest of your time in Barcelona, and let's keep talking about 5G and private networks and IoT in general.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.